So it seems there's a disconnect, there's a split between the compliant sheep who have turned up to the cafes and are very willing to show their vaccine passports. Those who have probably even had the vaccine and are boycotting the cafes anyway because they don't want to go through this onerous procedure. They don't want their morning coffee to be interrupted by uniformed police checking their papers. Kind of puts a crimp on your day, doesn't it? Especially given the fact that this relaxed cafe culture in places like Paris is ingrained into the French culture. Doesn't really work as a way of relaxation if there are police with truncheons and tasers threatening you if you don't have the right papers. Maybe your smartphone doesn't work. Maybe you can't connect to the network. Doesn't really make for a relaxing morning coffee, does it? Literal booster shots every 6 months for you to enjoy a coffee in an outside cafe. Italy has said that they're going to extend it to schools, universities, so you won't be able to get an education if you don't have the vaccine. But again, it's not mandatory. You just won't be able to have a coffee, an education, go on holiday, see your parents, have a wedding, but it's not mandatory, okay?
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm coming to you with the most important commercial that I've ever done. All of you know what MyPillow and myself have gone through in the last 5 months in my efforts to bring the truth forward. Well, it's all come down to this. I'm having a cyber symposium on August 10th, 11th, and 12th. This historical event will be live streamed 72 hours straight on my new platform, frankspeech.com. You can help by getting everybody you know to go to frankspeech.com now. To help support this Cyber Symposium event, I am offering some of the best prices ever on MyPillow products, but they're only offered at frankspeech.com. Go to frankspeech.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive these exclusive MyPillow offers. Thank you and God bless.
Could you imagine 18 months ago being told that citizens in major European capital cities would be forced to show identity papers to prove they've had a government-mandated shot simply to be able to drink a coffee at an outdoor cafe? That's what's happening in Paris, France right now. That's what's happening across France right now. They're literally being told, on top of not being able to sit outside and have a coffee, not even indoors, that they're going to be refused medical treatment in hospitals if it's non-emergency, if they don't have the vaccine, if they don't have the vaccine passport. Of course, who knows what's non-emergency? Many people turn up, show up to hospital. It's not an emergency in their own minds. A few hours later, it quickly becomes one. Are they going to be denied life-saving treatment at some point because they haven't had the vaccine? If you'd have told somebody 18 months ago that uniformed police were threatening people sitting outside trying to enjoy a coffee in the daytime, that if they hadn't got the proof that they'd taken the government-mandated shot, they would be fined, they'd be kicked off the premises, they'd eventually be put in prison. 18 months ago, you would have said that that was purebred tyranny, and it's happening in Paris right now. It's about to happen in Italy. It's happening in Greece. It's happening all over the developed world. Headline: Video: French police patrol cafes asking to see citizens' vaccine papers. We asked how this would be enforced. Would it be enforced by the business owners, the restaurant owners, the cafe owners themselves? No, it's literally being enforced by the police. Not to mention the fact, by the way, which I'm going to get into later in the show, you have Rwandan refugees literally killing priests. We've had numerous deaths of priests in France over the past 18 months. Nice, Paris, priests literally being beheaded. The teacher in France who showed the Prophet Muhammad cartoons being beheaded. Apparently, police resources don't need to be concentrated on that. They need to be concentrated on people having a cup of coffee in a cafe in an outside restaurant bar in France. Video has emerged out of Paris, France, and this is across the country, showing police patrolling cafes and bars, demanding to see people's credentials and making sure they're not breaking the law by enjoying themselves while unvaccinated. We've got the video clip in the article. Starts off with fines of €135 and verbal warnings, but from next week up to €9,000 fines in the event of a repeat offence. The cafe owners, the bar owners, even more draconian fines. In fact, I think I read recently up to €45,000, which would put most of these places out of business if they don't enforce the COVID passports, which of course they can't. They don't have the means to do so. Massive onerous fines, and then if there's another infraction after that, the owners of the cafes, the restaurants, go directly to prison if they don't enforce this. Purebred tyranny like we haven't seen since France was occupied by the Nazis in World War II. And that's not over-egging the case. That's literally what it is. They've never had it this bad. So there's other footage also emerged of private security trained staff and business owners checking the passes, which confirm vaccination, a negative test. By the way, that whole negative test thing in France, initially you could get a free negative test from the government to prove that you didn't have COVID. They're abolishing that. First, you're going to have to pay for the test at ever-rising costs. Then a negative test doesn't even matter. They're going to wipe that off the slate altogether. So you need to take the vaccine. Pretty interesting, given that the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting the virus, doesn't prevent you from spreading the virus. They're valuing the taking of the vaccine as more important than having a negative test. That's being eliminated because it's all about mass conformity. It's not about stopping the spread of a virus. So they're doing it in the cafes, they're doing it in the restaurants, as we point out in this article. A lot of the cafes in Paris right now are basically 75% empty. Now, for those Americans, the majority of the listeners right now, who have ever been to France, who have ever been to Paris, you know that that outside cafe culture is an integral part of their modern day civilization. The fact that at the height of summer, a lot of these cafes are completely empty kind of tells you what's going on. The government claims that the majority of French citizens have had both jabs, so they've presumably got their conformist vaccine passports, and yet even some of those people who have had the vaccine are avoiding the cafes. Cafes, the restaurants, the bars are going to be put out of business, and maybe that's, you know, a way to resist, a way to rebel against this imposition, this draconian imposition, the likes of which they've never seen since they were literally occupied by the Nazis. So we have that. We have another Reuters article on this, which points out the fact that it's not just people who want to go for a coffee who are being rejected. Headline out of Reuters: coffee and croissant in a French cafe. You'll need a COVID pass for that. The French morning ritual of a coffee and croissant became more complicated on Monday as people had to show proof of vaccination or negative COVID-19 test before taking a seat. A health pass now is to be shown to eat in a restaurant, drink in a bar, access non-emergency treatment in a hospital. I remember about a year ago we had articles in the UK suggesting that, quote, racists should be denied hospital treatment. So again, that was the entree into people's beliefs, people's personal political belief systems being used as a raison d'etre to deny them basic lifestyle activities. That's now literally the law in France, that if you go to a hospital for, quote, non-emergency treatment, which, as I pointed out at the start of the show, could very quickly turn into emergency treatment. Why would you go to a hospital if it wasn't deadly serious in the first place, especially now with all this COVID stuff going on? If you don't have the vaccine in France as of this moment, as of this day, and you go to hospital for, quote, non-emergency treatment, you will be turned away potentially to die. Intercity train travel, going from one French city to another. You don't have the vaccine, you don't have the vaccine passport, you don't travel, you don't go on holiday, you don't see your relatives, your elderly relatives may be very ill, you don't get to see them before they die. Those rules don't apply to elite, as I'm going to get into in the next segment. We've now got the UN Global Warming Climate Summit taking place in Scotland next November, this November coming up, actually. And the globalists who are arriving in their private jets, in their commercial carbon dioxide spewing jets, they won't be subject to the same restrictions that British citizens are subject now. So I haven't seen my parents for a year. I can't get into Spain without having to come back and quarantine. And if they move Spain to the, quote, red list, which they've threatened to do over the past few weeks, if I want to go and see my parents in Spain, then I come back to my home country, I will have to quarantine, not even at home, but in one of these brutally run prison-like quarantine hotels at my own expense to the tune of $2,000, where you're literally allowed to go outside for a period of about 30 minutes a day and exercise in the yard, like it was San Quentin or some prison like that, if I haven't had the vaccine. Oh, by the way, these UN globalists who are arriving for a conference, which could have been done via Zoom, which is how everyone else has had to communicate with their relatives and work for the past 18 months, those people don't need the vaccine. Once again, one rule for them, another rule for everyone else. So French people sitting at cafes outside, not even indoors, are being patrolled by police and being asked to show their COVID certification, their vaccine passports on their smartphones. Those who aren't able to show that, those who've tried to buck the system, are being threatened with fines. And eventually, if they keep resisting, being threatened with prison sentences. There's another headline here on that very subject out of reclaimthenet.org. It says, they should give us a truncheon and a pistol, says French restaurant owner, asked to enforce vaccine passports. So while some of the footage shows police, again, while literally Islamists and criminal refugees, illegal migrants are beheading, killing priests across the country of France, that's obviously not as important as making middle-class white people in French cafes show their vaccine passports. While that's happening, the restaurant owners, the bar owners, the cafe owners are saying that they can't enforce this because they don't have the monopoly on power to do so. So some restaurant staff are going as far as requesting weapons to be able to deal with angry citizens who are upset about their civil liberties being crushed. So it seems there's a disconnect, there's a split between the compliant sheep who have turned up to the cafes and are very willing to show their vaccine passports, those who have probably even had the vaccine and are boycotting the cafes anyway because they don't want to go through this onerous procedure. They don't want their morning coffee to be interrupted by uniformed police checking their papers. Kind of puts a crimp on your day, doesn't it? Especially given the fact that this relaxed cafe culture in places like Paris is ingrained into the French culture, doesn't really work as a way of relaxation if there are police with truncheons and tasers threatening you if you don't have the right papers. Maybe your smartphone doesn't work, maybe you can't connect to the network. Doesn't really make for a relaxing morning coffee, does it? But now even the owners of these cafes are coming out and saying that they can't enforce this. Says Pascal Aubin, a Parisian waiter, has taken orders, advised on wines, and delivered innumerable dishes to residents and visitors in his 32-year career. But the Choubidou restaurant in Montparnasse, Paris, Pascal had this to say, quote, I'm being asked to do the job of a copper as well. It's crazy. Says his consternation is not so much with the passport itself, but the decision that makes restaurants and their waiters accountable for making sure their clients have a passport. And basically it goes through the whole list. It interviews a number of cafe owners, waiters at these restaurants, these bars, these cafes in Paris who are saying a lot of people are not happy about this. They don't have truncheons, they don't have pistols to enforce it, which is why the state comes in with the uniformed police to literally make people present their papers to drink a coffee in the morning. If this was predicted 18 months ago in major Western cities, you would say that was purebred tyranny, and that's exactly what's happening over the past 2 days in France. And close behind is Italy with this headline, Italy to extend vaccine passports to public transport and schools. Despite massive protests against the measures, Italy is set to extend its vaccine passport system to public transport and schools from September 1st. Potentially exacerbating growing public contempt towards the draconian rules, authorities announced that the list of venues where the passport would be required is to be extended. So teachers won't be able to work unless they get the vaccine and the green pass, which, by the way, they introduced in Israel a few months ago, and it wasn't enforced to any degree. Then we had the Delta variant and all these other variants, which now Israeli doctors and scientists are saying the vaccine is about 30 to 40% effective against these new variants. So the vaccines are failing. They're completely useless in many countries who are further along in this window. So now, as we had the article the other day, we've had Swedish professors and others saying that people will need to get at least 5 total COVID vaccines. That could extend up to 8, 9, 10. Then you get to a point where people who haven't, for whatever reason, had their 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 booster shots aren't allowed to engage in basic lifestyle activities. And depending on the country, how far along they are in this pandemic, that's starting to happen. Literal booster shots every 6 months for you to enjoy a coffee in an outside cafe. Italy has said that they're going to extend it to schools, universities, so you won't be able to get an education if you don't have the vaccine. But again, it's not mandatory. You just won't be able to have a coffee, an education, go on holiday, see your parents, have a wedding, but it's not mandatory, okay? Customers and venues may face fines ranging from €400 to €1,000 if businesses fail to implement the regulation. Institutions that frequently break the rules risk being shut down for up to 10 days. And of course, after 10 days, it will be for good. But don't worry, because Health Minister Roberto Sparano said the extension of the scheme to include schools and public transport was necessary to, quote, avoid closures and to safeguard freedom. Yes, having a mandatory government shot for the privilege of enjoying a cup of coffee in the morning is part of your freedom. How more Orwellian can you get than that? Good news, though, over in Switzerland, where we have this headline. Swiss police threaten to stop enforcing COVID-19 rules altogether. Police in Switzerland have threatened to stop enforcing COVID-19 rules over fears that the measures are disproportionately undermining the fundamental rights of citizens. This was a letter sent by a group of police officers to the Swiss Federation of Police Officers, warning of potential insubordination within the force over the enforcement of draconian laws. So there is some resistance even within the police force in Switzerland. That's great news. But I mentioned this before the break. UN globalists arriving in UK for climate summit won't face COVID restrictions imposed on British citizens. So Brits who travel abroad and then come back to their own country as residents, as citizens, have to play a lottery basically with this system that the government set up of green, amber, amber plus and red list countries, where depending on the country, and they can move the goalposts at any time, even if they're still abroad enjoying or trying to enjoy their holiday, they don't even know when they come back what they'll be forced to do. If countries are on the red list, they literally have to, at their own expense to the tune of about $2,000, self-isolate, quarantine within these prison-like hotels that are enforced by brutal conditions, horrible, rotting food, basically prison guards. They're allowed outside of this hotel in a designated area near an airport to exercise, to get some fresh air for about an hour. It's literally prison conditions. If they come back from a red list. If they come back from an amber list country, and again, these countries are changing all the time, they have to self-isolate at home. They get visits from the local authorities, from police officers. We had a story last week of a 12-year-old girl being traumatized after multiple visits from a police officer at her home. You know, the people who don't have to abide by these rules, the globalists, the elite, who are visiting while traveling over, by the way, in CO2 belching private planes and commercial jets, visiting Scotland for this UN climate change conference in November. Those who have had the vaccine don't need to do anything whatsoever. Even those who haven't had the vaccine, the red list countries, their quarantine period is cut in half. The amber list attendees who are coming from amber list countries, they don't have to isolate at all. So it's one rule for them, another rule for British citizens in our own country.
It is through our 5 senses that we are kept fascinated and hypnotized by the lies we are told. And the only way to see through this illusion is with our higher senses. which is why fluoridated water is a big problem. Consuming too much fluoride forms phosphate crystals around the pineal gland and shuts down its natural functions. Natural functions which have been known for millennia. The Hindu chakras align with the endocrine system. The chakra aligned with the pineal gland is the third eye, also described as the seat of the soul. The pineal gland is what connects us to higher levels of consciousness and otherwise unseen dimensions of reality. Fluoride-free water is essential to keeping our pineal gland healthy. Our water filtration systems with the proper filters will keep your drinking water fluoride-free, and the ProPure shower head will seal the deal. Get them both today for yourself or a friend at InfoWarsStore.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Owen Schroyer here, the host of the InfoWars War Room, and I am very excited about our latest supplement addition to InfoWarsStore.com. Now, I've been supplementing with greens, fibers, and vegetable capsules for a long time, and so I was excited to hear that we were adding our own greens fiber caps to InfoWarsStore.com. But then I read the ingredients, and I was blown away. Listen to this. Organic pea fiber, organic alfalfa leaf, organic wheatgrass leaf, organic cilantro leaf, organic kale leaf, organic flax sprout, organic quinoa sprout. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these things are so incredible for your health. Just one of these ingredients can be a life-changing supplement for your health, and we've packed it all in to Fiber Green caps at InfoWarsStore.com. So I'm excited to add this to my supplement routine every day. I suggest that you do the same thing, and right now it's at an introductory price of $19.95. That's 33% off at InfoWarsStore.com.